Hey, Aptera community. I just wanted to follow up with a comment that I got on my last video rebuttaling Steve's return from his downtime, and it was so he Wineberry Red says it seems to me that Steve is appropriately qualifying that he thinks Aptera is going to IPO without providing any evidence. I don't know what appropriate qualifying means in that context. So it's hard for me to really understand what he means here. But you, on the other hand, say that they are not going to IPO without presenting any evidence. And that's true. I did do that in that argument. So can you support your argument? Nice. So I replied to him, says, only things I'm basing my prediction are the failed USCG fundraising campaign that indicates there are no big banks willing to underwrite an IPO. And big banks don't want to underwrite unsuccessful IPOs because they spend a lot of time putting together all the information, working with the SEC, blah, 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 blah. And they rely on a successful IPO to take a percentage of the gains. So without a successful case, especially without this USCG fundraising campaign being any type of success, I don't think there's going to be any banks as well that are going to be interested in an IPO. Also, the pending SEC investigation may also provide a challenge or a roadblock to them getting a submission for, I think it's an S1 form or whatever they got to file for the IPO, may get blocked by the Securities Exchange Commission until the investigation completes or is resolved. So those are my two reasons. I thought it was a legitimate, request. And then I'm also curious how he's classifying stating no evidence is appropriately qualifying a prediction. Sounds like an oxymoron declaration. Unless you mean by that he is saying, don't listen to what I'm saying, but I'm saying they will perform an IPO. Is if that is appropriately qualifying to you, and I didn't get a response on that. But so I am curious about what he meant by appropriately qualifying, because he didn't qualify anything. He just basically said, he hinted that he got an email from Chris, and he hinted that if they're in the stages and he doesn't know that there are a lot of things they can't divulge because of the IPO requirements. And that's not enough to me. That's not appropriate qualifying anything. That's just basically starting rumors and speculation. That's how I look at it. So I decided to go to the current authority on the internet, ChatGPT, and I decided to ask what is needed for a startup to IPO into a marketplace. And anyone can ask this question. I think it would be great research to do. ChatGPT, I view, is sort of the I don't know what you'd call it, maybe the collective conscious or the collective intelligence of humanity. And there's many discussions and podcasts on that topic. The best ones I like are from David Eagleman. If you guys ever want to look him up, he's got several videos and notable people he interviews about that topic. But I do view ChatGPT, even with all of its strengths and limitations, to be a general collective of the knowledge on the internet placed by humans. So in a sense, when I interact with it, I'm looking at it as the best of what is out there and has to offer. Not always the best. Every once in a while, some junk falls in there and you call them on it and it comes back and says, apologizes all over itself in a very, maybe albeit mock relational, but that's how it was set up to do it. So with that said, for a start to go public via initial public offering and list on a public stock exchange like NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange, here's a structured overview. So here's the structured overview of all the things that need to be there. A is kind of missing. B and C are very generic. Aptera could qualify, but proven business model, consistent revenue growth, not really. Audible financial statements, perhaps. Scalable operations, incredible path to profitability. Not really. So this is what Steve was going after when he's talking about polydrops and the fact that they're now selling and creating some income from polydrops. If they're going to try and sneak that in here, possibly, we'll see. Financial and legal requirements, SEC filing. They have to file this S1 registration statement. They have to show financials. They have the management discussion, business models, use of proceeds. These are all pretty generic. Even Sarbanes-Oxley Act compliance, which was an outcome from Enron era and WorldCom and all the failures that were scamming the system, tried to tie up some loopholes that are still prevalent on the IPO process. Underwriter engagement. This is the big one. Underwrite the offering, help set the IPO price and structure, assist with the roadshow. So, this is a big hiccup for Aptera right now, because if a large bank does not look like it's going to be a successful IPO, they're not gonna engage. They're not gonna bother with it. Then there's exchange specific requirements between New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. Again, I encourage everybody to ask this question and read through it. There's the summary checklist. Then I said, looking at Aptera Motors, do they look ready for an IPO? So I'm trying to state it as non-committal one way or the other. Aptera has expressed an interest in pursuing an initial public offering in the future, but as of now, it does not appear fully prepared for such a move. Here's an overview of their current status. Current status of Aptera Motors: production timeline. Aptera aims to commence production in 2025. Financial position: as of December 31st, Aptera reported total assets, showing a loss of $35 million a year. Fundraising efforts: company has been actively raising capital through crowdfunding and private investments. Notably, it launched the Regulation CF offering to raise up to $5 million. Well, it's actually up to $10 million in Class B common stock. So, convertible note offering. So July 2024, this was the USCG announced a 60 million convertible note offering to attract institutional investors. That was a big dog, or a big failure. So considerations for IPO readiness: to pursue IPO typically meet this criteria: consistent revenue and profitability, demonstrating a track record of revenue generation and ideally profitability, which they don't have, regulatory compliance, adhering to financial reporting standards, and that's pretty loose, like I said. Corporate governance: establish a board of directors. That's pretty easy to check mark. Market conditions: who cares? But that talks about, receptivity and timing. Really speaks into, are you going to find an underwriter who's also interested in taking it IPO? While Aptera has made strides in fundraising and product development, it currently lacks consistent revenue streams. So most of this information, it looks like, because it comes up with this article from a little over a year ago at the Wall Street Journal, which was pretty damning. And of course, Steve rebutted in a video heavily. But it still seems to be taking a lot of information out of that. So I asked another question: does the SEC investigation affect the ability to IPO? Yes, SEC can significantly affect a company's ability to IPO. Here's how. Directly impacts an SEC investigation on IPO readiness, delay or suspension of the IPO process. SEC may refuse to declare the S-1 registration statement effective until the investigation is resolved. This means the company cannot legally offer shares to the public until the issues are cleared up. Loss of investor confidence. That's a big one. Even if legally allowed to proceed, the mere existence of an investigation can deter institutional investors. It's probably why I think the investigation was started after or during the tail end of when they realized the USCG $60 million offering was not going to happen. It can reduce IPO price or lead to the offer being canceled altogether. Reputational damage: company may be a high risk. So these are all the very good reasons that you can look up yourself. ChatGPT is a great resource. You can even try and tweak it and post it. Try and argue with it if you want. I like the ability to argue with ChatGPT, and it very firmly yet politely rebuttals. And that's what should be happening on a website or a YouTube channel like Steve's by now, but is not. So I encourage anybody with any questions before investing, at least to do this minimal type of questioning and research yourself and get a sense for, try not to fool yourself using it. So in Aptera's case, if the SEC investigating Aptera is investigating, for example, over fundraising and financial reporting, it would almost certainly delay or block until resolved. Aptera would need to fully address the concerns. Let me know if you want to help reviewing specific SEC. And I say, review the SEC investigation of Aptera Motors. And it just gave a little short 3-paragraph summary of what's being investigated. Then it says, does the failure of the last fundraising of qualified investors through the USCG affect the ability to IPO? Yes, the failure of Aptera recent through the qualified investors, such as the one reportedly managed through the USCG group, can negatively impact their ability to pursue. And here's why: signal of weak investor confidence. Institutional and qualified are typically the first to spot red flags. That's a big one. If they passed on the opportunity, it may suggest doubts that Aptera's business model or financials, execution risks, regulatory concerns, capital shortfall. So IPO readiness typically requires significant working capital for scaling production, what have you. Underwriter reluctance, that's again another topic. Down round or dilution risk. If Aptera needs to return to the private market for more capital at lower valuation, it may result in a down round. That's a second round, meaning, hey, we didn't get enough in the first round. We need to come up with a second round. We're going to lower the price on the second round, etc. Dilutes existing. So there's a risk of a second round happening because first round may not be successful enough for getting whatever, as we've already learned following this company for 5 years, they never state exactly what they need properly and follow through properly with promises. Some call them promises, some call them, goals, I guess, is the way Steve looks at it. And of course, he rebuttals those. So he gives them plenty of leeway for exits when they don't meet them, which they haven't met any of them. So what Aptera would need to do to recover and still pursue, Aptera would need a secure, successful bridge round, possibly with concessions. So this bridge round talks about next. I ask about next. Hit key production and delivery milestones. That's key. They haven't done that once. Resolve or clarify the SEC investigation, which is still happening, I guess. Build a more transparent and confidence-inspiring investor narrative. There you go. Everyone says they're transparent to a fault. They need to build a more transparent and confidence-inspiring investor narrative. These are maybe hypothetical case or comparing to other. What is a successful bridge count? A successful bridge round is a short-term financial round that helps a company bridge the gap in its current. So it's kind of like a mini IPO. I think they go into that later on here too. Characteristics of purposeful timing. Find a temporary gap when the company prepares for a larger raise or IPO. This is basically crowdfunding. I mean, it's crowdfunding, but using the mechanics of the SEC's rules and regulations to provide crowdfunding. This is basically what they're doing today. So example bridge round. Let's say they need $10 million, finalize, to do all these three things. When a bridge round fails, a failed or undersubscribed can signal declining investor confidence, which it might be doing. We don't know. I have a feeling when they go to, fear of missing out announcement by saying, hey, we're going to close this in 2 weeks or 4 weeks. You've got 4 weeks to buy in, or else you lose. They might close out the current round and finish off the 10 million. Force a down round report terms in the next raise. So that means a lower amount in the next. So when they go on their road trip, this is probably what's going to happen. They're going to close out this current campaign, and I've already stated this in a previous video, that I believe they're going to come up with, because these guys are crowdfunding geniuses, they're going to come up with a fear of missing out series of emails like they've been doing, as well as, colluding with. I mean, I don't think they're actively colluding, like on the phone saying, hey, you say this, Steve, and then we'll say this to the investors. I don't believe that's going on in an intentional, calculated method with hands wringing and what have you. But it's where they've got Steve in a place that he knows where his bread is buttered, and his bread is buttered by Aptera. In other words, all the reservation holdings he has and the 2,000 or so a month he makes on his YouTube channel is all based on successful announcements and justified, milestone misses from Aptera. So he plays into that stuff just by nature of, there's probably a term for it out there I'm missing, but Steve is definitely a colluding factor when it comes to these activities. So then I ask, what are the other paths to IPO? Then, using an underwriter, would any other paths benefit Aptera? When alternative paths, there are alternative paths. Some may offer potential advantages to a company like alternative IPOs, pros and cons, direct listing. So they could go, and I can't remember what it's called. There is a term for it where they just list themselves on the stock market, basically sort of like start out on the pink sheets, for instance, and that way they've got some kind of public exposure. But they could so this is companies with strong brand recognition, sufficient cash reserves, which they don't have. They do have some brand recognition, and no need to raise new capital immediately. It's probably not going to happen in this way. It avoids dilution of existing shares, more market driven pricing, etc. It ain't going to happen. That's. So here's another one, SPAC, the Special Purpose Acquisition Company merger. So here they can, if they go in with polydrops, for instance, and let's say they schmooze the heck out of the husband and wife team at polydrop somehow and decide that they're going to utilize a merged set of financials to go public, in some way, shape, or form, because polydrops happens to have as Steve mentioned, a functional, I don't think it's profitable, but I think it's functional model where they're actually building a product and selling it on the market. That's pretty functional. So it could be a faster route. Cons, increases regulatory scrutiny right after. So think of, it says here, investor skepticism about EV after high profile flops like Nikola and Lordstown. This requires full due diligence and can be derailed. Reverse merger with a public shell. This is another one, another strategy. So this could be another strategy with polydrops if they wanted to. It's sort of a backdoor IPO. So there are here, and here's the mini IPO. This probably is the most likely if they're on their own and they're having to do it. Companies with loyal retail investor bases and strong community, definitely Aptera. At least in terms of I don't know if there are 17,000 anymore, but let's say there's half of that. There's at least 8,000 to 9,000 investors that probably continue to bump in on these types of activities. So Aptera already has experience with crowdfunding, and yes, so this is most likely. So the cons, limited to 75 max, may not be enough. May be taken seriously by institution. May not be taken seriously by. We already saw that happen. So this one they might go after, but it probably would fail, just like the USCG. Potentially the best non-traditional route for it. It fits the grassroots fundraising style. Yeah. So anyways, I think this is, so then would you like a sample A+ structure based on Aptera's no financial? Yes, please. Great. Here are, a breakdown of a mini IPO plan. And I really encourage anyone, before putting a single penny into this company, do this kind of discussion. Bounce it off of boards. Unfortunately, in the AOC Discord, you got guys like we just talked about him, Kamakiri or whatever his name is. He's, talk about someone who is deserving of, the title Steve gave, I can't remember, name not shown, whatever it was. He came in and said he's a piece of work. Kamakiri is a piece of work. This guy is a troll in the sense of every single reply to people's comments is to argue and incite negative responses. That's the definition of a troll. It doesn't make a difference whether it's positive Aptera or negative Aptera. A troll is somebody who's just out there to stir the pot. And that's what this Kamakiri does. So you got too many guys like that on the AOC Discord channel. It's sad because none of this type of rational discussion and critical analysis can go on in there. It will get cut short by just idiots doing all kinds of commenting out there to stir the pot. And it's really sad. It's really sad. And on top of that, Steve, nor any of his henchmen, I guess you'd call them, his admins, of which I can't remember his name, but he was in ours for a little while. And, we were discussing how to be relational, and he doesn't get it. He didn't really understand the concept of what relational really means in discussions. So there's your admin for the AOC Discord channel. Someone who just doesn't get how to be polite to others, how to hear somebody else's opinion and disagree with it politely. Say, thank you for that opinion. I heard what you said was XYZ. Did I get that right? Oh, okay. Well, I happen to disagree with it. Here is why. Let me give you the points. That's a simple kind of, where were the moms and dads? I mean, really, this is kind of a sad state of affairs that our internet has just, exacerbated or put on steroids, this lack of relational capacity in our culture. And I'm sad to see it. It's really hard to fight against, especially in an effort for really helping to provide a community with enough information to make a good decision on their own as to whether to listen to these guys or not listen to these guys. Well, you've heard my opinion on it. I listened to these guys in the beginning. I put about 23 grand of my own money into this place 5 years ago. And I kind of figured out as time went, hey, these guys really aren't doing what they say they're going to do. And, it made perfect rational sense to me. And then going out there and having those discussions with these guys or trying to get Steve to have an interview with actually hard-hitting questions was impossible. Absolutely impossible. Still is today. And on top of that, I got clobbered to the point of just backing out or bowing out myself. So I started my own little, I call it the Aptera Relational Discord. Sure, it's unofficial, but you're welcome to join. These are the kind of discussions from guys who really know better than have experience with these things more than I do, and can kind of tell you in detailed fashion where ChatGPT may have failed because they pulled the wrong information off the wrong server out there or something like that. And you might ask it, you might adjust it and say, hey, ChatGPT, so-and-so says this thing on it. What do you think? And he goes, it'll do the research. So do that kind of research again, please. Would shares be sellable by investors? Yes. Shares sold in a regulation, that's another question I have, because that would be a big benefit to it. Freely tradable, but with some important caveats. So can investors sell Regulation A plus shares? Yes. Tier 2 offerings, not restricted securities, are immediately sellable by subject to availability of a trading venue. So this is the problem, though. You'd have to have a platform which to sell them on. I don't know if CompuServe, I think, is the current one they went away from and then back to, would provide that platform or not. But yeah, I think it does. And I think, having that mini IPO with Class A shares offering and having everyone who's crowdsourced convert to Class A as a result of that mini IPO would be a positive thing. I'd love to see it happen myself, because that means I can liquidate easily without having to go through escrow, third-party escrow services or what have you to try and transfer my contracts, and get a buy-in or acceptance or approval from Aptera, which may or may not decide to allow me to sell my shares at this point. So this would be a good outcome. Will it happen? I don't think so. holding period none. For Aptera, if they pursue this path, what's their incentive? They should plan to list the shares on the over-the-counter market. That's called the pink sheets on the in marketplace speak. NASDAQ, or as soon as possible, are offering to provide liquidity. Alternatively, they could partner with a secondary platform, Start Engine, which is one they're familiar with. By now, everyone on listening to this anyway should know about their, I can't remember what the name, NGen startup that went away after, I think, a 300,000 or so raise they collected themselves to allow investors to sell to each other. Yeah, so continue this discussion as you will. Have fun with it. Knock yourselves out and comment below on anything you found or problems in this thread that I've presented here. I'd be interested in. If you want to, the place to really do that, you can comment below here, but the place to go into details on it or a lengthy discussion on it is really the Discord channel. So I invite you there. I'll put another link on this video, and hope you guys, hope the best for everybody.